Okay, today I am taking the same boring route as usual. One more thing. I have to check the coolant. Give me a moment, I might edit this. Okay, so interesting situation. I hope that it will be enough coolant. I had few drops left. I will be buying some then. Pressure will increase and we will lower the bank of the car. It should, yeah, it doesn't show the error anymore. So it was borderline, but yeah, it's better that I will buy. I will need to buy the water as well. Okay, cat. Possibly my fault for lowering the temperature of the interior of the air inside. The system sometimes reacts in a weird way. Might have increased slightly the temperature of water of the mix, the coolant mix, and ejected or something like that. It's all possible. Okay, see you in a bit. Give me a sec. Okay, sorry for a bit late turning on the camera. Couple seconds, but still. Okay, we will go around as usual. I have no idea when they will repair the road. If it will be this year. Because sadly there seems to be a damage to this tiny bridge. And in theory it shouldn't be a problem, but because it's like it's not a bridge in a administrative sense. It doesn't have to, be up to specifications, because it's what, 10 feet long or less, something like that. They're taking their time. I don't know if they're waiting for the availability of the big block of concrete or something like that. drove past there twice and there was no one. And I'm not talking today. Today, of course, is it's Easter, so it's like the Great Friday. So of course today is a bit different, but yeah. I wouldn't blame them if they didn't work today, so this would be normal, but for weeks I haven't seen anyone work. We'll go around, I will stop at the station, check prices, because Strait of Hormuz is happening. I don't know if I should comment. Like, I don't have too much to add on how incredibly smart this war is. Very well thought out. But, like, what can I say? Even if you don't include prices, even if we don't talk about economics, even if we talk just about foreign policy and basic stuff, even from point of view as only US and only taking into account what's good for US, this war looks bad for US. It is bad for us. Like, unlike many of my friends, I am not against interventions, although I would limit the interventions to really necessary ones. Like, this is a bit of a weird topic and it's hard to talk about it because I'm Polish and I know how much we needed and we wanted US help in the 80s when we were striking against our government, and how allegedly Reagan wanted to do something but was told that US doesn't have enough, force assets around the world to deter Soviet Union in case larger conflict would be brought about by intervention. And intervention in Poland, that would basically be the death for the Soviet Union if the Soviet Union was taking Cold War seriously. And they were. So they wouldn't allow it. Not like this. So I know how that lack of help for protesters, how bad it is. On the other hand, US cannot get itself involved in any action where one could justify it as, well, there are people protesting, we need totalitarian regime, we need to help. Like, I wish it was that easy. And yes, there are times where you should intervene, in my opinion, but it's not easy, it's very difficult. And you can't do this when you put no thought into how alliances work, how politics work, how economy works, how people work, how like Trump gave a speech, what was it, yesterday or something like that, and he gave a typical pre-war speech, except he's what, month and change inside the war. Okay, I'll be back in a moment. Okay, I'm back. So what else? Also, let's not pretend that this war was started to help people or something like that. That's not completely untrue, but you have to view it from the other side. Like, protesters are useful for US. In that sense, yes, US wants to help protesters because protesters can help US. It's the typical, work of the government to outsource a lot of their job to people. In this case, not their citizens, but, other people. So when you view it in totality, I don't know, I see like 5 points against intervention in Iran, and maybe half a point for intervention. And those are like, I am not even trying to think about all the reasons against and what could be reasons for. Like, maybe I could find 1.5 decent reason for intervention in Iran. If I tried hard enough, I could certainly find more than 5 reasons against. So I think we can safely assume that this intervention doesn't make sense. I wonder when the voters in US will realize that even if everything goes okay and you change the government in a country that didn't like you for a government that does like you, that it doesn't eliminate all the problems. And sometimes it can make problems even worse in some cases. For example, if, of course, Trump isn't going to put opposition in Venezuela in power, but if opposition in Venezuela was, like pro-US and they were friendly and stuff like this, it would be much, much easier to start to actually abuse this relationship and have more of the, moving drugs and stuff like this. Okay, I'll be in a moment. Okay. Apologies, but here I cannot leave the phone in the car. I parked badly. Okay. So yes, previously there was not a lot of drugs being smuggled from Venezuela. If you had friendly government in Venezuela, then cartels and other criminal organizations would be able to use this as a cover to smuggle more drugs. And that's even if the government of Venezuela and government of US were fighting them with full force, because it would be a safer bet. Not now. Would this happen necessarily with drugs? Probably not, because Venezuela isn't exactly a great place to smuggle drugs from. Especially if you have Mexico, if you have a couple of other countries that are bigger in this space. So yeah, but there's other stuff that friendly government in Venezuela might not be able to, or might make worse for US than unfriendly one. Now, I would still say that having friendly relationships, especially if they are not forced, between countries is still a positive. You know, you can blast Mexico for for having immigrants apparently to US, but if there are better diplomatic ties between Mexico and US, then it pays back more in different areas than US loses, and just as in air quotes, loses by having big immigration. Because this is very much not a huge loss. And of course, this is if we ignore the fact that immigrants, you know, overall are net positive, at least in the US and in many other countries. Like, yes, there are situations in which immigration can be bad. It's especially true if your country gets overwhelmed. In case of US, especially the southern states, if they are overwhelmed, I would say almost they are overwhelmed by choice, by the fact that, by how they structure things. suffering from immigration that doesn't have to be there. Like, I will bring the example of Ukraine. During first 2 months after Russia restarted its aggression on Ukraine in 2022, Poland accepted, or through Poland moved about 3 million Ukrainians. So 3 times 8, that's like, even if we give US benefit of the doubt, it's like approximately, it's like 19 to 25 million people arriving in US in 2 months. And disproportionately not working people, but people who are fleeing, and people who can't work, and people who need help. Unlike the immigrants in US, vast majority of whom are people who work, and work jobs that many Americans don't want to do. So I don't know how much like full health insurance in US, how much it would cost if you were negotiating for 20 million people. Maybe Medicare or Medicaid, one of those, I always mix them up, would know how much it would cost to, full insure, to give full medical insurance to 20 million people, let's say, arriving in US in 2 months. And now imagine that that's the cost that you have to incur at the start, at the beginning. What happens later, that's how well you deal with this stuff, but you have to pay from the beginning. And that's what we did. So I am pretty sure that Ukrainian migration to Poland had worse effects, although I don't have personally any problem with it, worse effects than Mexican and Latino and other migration into US. But we got a lot of talented people here now. Okay, I will be back in a moment. Okay, I'm back. So, what was the... Yeah, we were talking about Ukrainian migration here. Let's be honest, it was forced migration. It's not like they had choice. They came here for better life. No, they came here to live, to be alive, not to be bombed. Okay, so what were the worst effects that I've seen of Ukrainian migration to Poland? Because there are fears that, since especially a lot of women with kids arrived, that they will displace a lot of women, Polish women, in their jobs here. In the jobs that Polish women also want to take. So So what jobs have I seen them take? Cleaning, and that's largely something that there aren't many Polish women who would clean someone's house for cheap, let's say, because of course if you increase the costs, then you'll have more people who will do this. But if you want to have some kind of, deal with someone who can work once or twice a month for a few hours, you just want to, increase the amount of money they get because they're on retirement or something like that, and you don't want to pay a lot. Yes, I've seen some displacement there, mainly in a way the wages didn't go up. That's what mostly happened. The wages stagnated. So I have to force my cleaning lady to accept more money because she works, for example, for 2 days, and each day she works like 6 hours and does some heavy duty stuff, and she demands about $25 for this 12 hours of work, and I have to force her, but she won't. Even if I force her, she won't accept more than double that. She just won't. She genuinely thinks that she would look bad, that she would that people would have bad opinion of her, stuff like this. So this is scary sometimes. Okay, I will be back in 2 minutes. Give me a sec. Okay, so we are talking cleaning ladies, and yeah, their wages stagnated, but the effect wasn't so bad. There is, first of all, you won't, if you have a cleaning lady that you trust, you won't invite a stranger to your house if you are not hard pressed to do so. So it's less of a problem than you would think, at least initially. Okay, I will be back in a moment again because I have to buy water now. A sec. Okay, I bought water. It should be distilled water. It says it's demineralized, which I always joke that it means that it's demoralized. Okay, so we were talking cleaning ladies. So for them, not much apart from the lowest, you could say, maybe not tier, but lowest wages. Usually not professional cleaning ladies, but ones that were doing, from time to time, might have been hired as additional help or something like that. Okay, what else? I saw some Ukrainian nannies. I would assume that the costs, that wages of nannies, of women taking care after children, stagnated for a while, but I'm almost certain they are already up, or at least that this stagnation was for no more than few months. Hear like hiss, then tell me, because there is some problem either with turbine or some vacuum subsystem or something like that. Okay, and what was the most obvious impact that I saw? So where Ukrainian women really, you could see in public space that they did take over and they did increase competition on the job market. Cashiers. No hissing for a moment because yeah, cashiers were especially female cashiers, but cashiers in general, not that, well, most cashiers are female in Poland, like 80% or something, so initially there was a lot of hostility in shops in places like this, because that's where most women that I saw affected were. Well, most of them were, yeah, working as cashiers, and well, there is always fear that, you know, not just fear, that the shop won't give you, you know, increase in salary, because why would they? They can hire someone to work for slightly above minimum wage, so it doesn't look weird, doesn't look like they exploit. But yeah, those were three categories of jobs that I saw some kind of negative impact due to immigration. And how much am I? And realistically, only in the, if we are talking about the whole job, not just the lowest tier or most casual tier, we are mostly talking about cashiers who were pressured for year and a half, especially since it was, shops were still recovering from, you know, pandemic, from being closed, from all of this stuff, and then, you know, you have another 1.5 million female workers who are often much better, you know, educated, because their degrees or something like that doesn't work in Poland, or it takes time to get it you know, approved here. So yeah, year and a half. I would say that at the end of 2024 that problem no longer existed. And by problem, what do I mean? that the real effect was small. It was most visible for cashiers. I personally knew like 24 new cashiers who were basically just Ukrainian women who fled here with their kids and who needed to have jobs. And of course, people were talking about how much they will steal, how much they will take our jobs, how much they will... No, they took some jobs in few select select areas of job market. In other areas it wasn't so disproportional. And how disproportional was it in cashiers market? I would say less than 10% of cashiers that are currently employed and that were employed back then even. Less than 10% of them are Ukrainian. Yeah, for a year and a half lower wages. That's what it meant, basically. Other places, not really. Like that's why it's so important. I talked about how upfront we had to pay the cost of insuring every Ukrainian person who moved to Poland. And that was regardless whether it was, to live here or temporary to just stay here and move on to another country. Polish government guaranteed it for 3 years. So because that was done up front, that meant that Ukrainian people weren't as pressured into finding jobs as they would be. Like they didn't have to find job immediately, assuming they had some money left, or their husbands were sending to them or something like that. Of course, I realize that not everyone has the situation, but a lot of people had. So a lot of people had some money, so they didn't have to find jobs immediately. They could often take care of their children for a while before they found a job. That meant that they didn't accept first job that was given to them, which meant that their wages weren't that low, which meant that they weren't as competitive against Polish workers as one would think. And they often had very temporary effect, because why? Because often a lot of, for example, women who became cashiers or who started cleaning houses, they were educated, and I mean higher education, STEM fields in medicine, and like one of the nannies that I know, that Ukrainian nannies, she's a doctor. She was a doctor, and for a year and a half or almost 2 years she couldn't practice medicine here because the administrative process of handling her diploma It took a while, but because she was insured initially and had some, money, she could start that process. She didn't have to worry about getting a job immediately. Then she could negotiate with people who didn't have problem with her. And now think of that. You are leaving your child with a person who's a doctor, who's a pediatrician. I would feel safer. I'm sorry. You have someone who's trained in it. So, yeah. And as far as I know, now she works in a hospital because, of course, they transferred the diploma, they nostrified it. So, yeah. So it was much less of, people's worries were exaggerated vastly. And I remember that the biggest worries were in 2014 after Crimea, because a lot of Ukrainians emigrated here. And yeah, there was some solid racism, ethnicism. I don't know what the word would be. Bigotry, basically. But it's like, they became neighbors. You generally, if you are a thinking person, you stop becoming a bigot against someone whom you know and who doesn't, isn't a bad person provably, and you don't differentiate them based on you differentiate them initially based on some moronic, ideas. Okay, I'll be back in a moment. Okay, I'm back. So, people from US, please tell me if you have some neighbors like this. If you know some people like this, for example, let's go a bit with a stereotype and let's say, do you know some white people who have black people as neighbors, or at least relative neighbors, like living not far away from them? And those white folks, let's say they are racist, like not super racist, not like white supremacists, I don't know, some sort of, belief that they are superior, just spewing a lot of, how black people do crime and, the stereotypes. But they have some black people in their neighborhood, and when they interact with them, they sort of become okay with them. And then they say, yeah, this and this, they're good people, not like other black people. I hope you know well, I hope you don't know the type, but if you do, please tell me. So yeah, that's how it's initially started. Like initially for the first couple of months, and later it again flared up after the invasion restarted. That's what happened. Like initially there was bigotry, then there was this kind of selective bigotry, and after a year and a half, 2 years, like basically only in 2025, it started in like first half of 2025, I stopped hearing, yeah, the Ukrainians, they take jobs, they will, she's a Ukrainian or something like this, The whispers stopped. So it took about 1.5 years, 2 years. Okay, I'll be back in a moment. Okay. Now that I think about it, I yapped for 40 minutes about really heavy topics. This type of bigotry that I mentioned, that you find people who to be acceptable, but others, you still believe that others are bad, that's something that sadly Nazis realized, and they warned against it, they warned themselves against it. This famous saying, I forgot if it was Himmler or one of the highest ups in Nazi Germany, did say, that we all know that one good Jew, or something similar. Like Hitler knew few Jews that he liked. From memory, his commanding officer in World War I am not even sure if he didn't survive the war, because Hitler just pulled him out of concentration camps and stuff like this, because he had respect for him, because people are like this. Okay, so this is something that Nazis discouraged. I will always say that the power of personal relationships is immense. So, for example, famously, Poland was forced to declare war on Japan in World War II. Japan didn't accept. And Polish crews didn't want to fight against Japan. But Japan was, of course, an ally of Germany. So what happened in Poland? Of course, in Lithuania you had famous Japanese consul who saved between 10 to 15,000 Jews. But if we are talking in Poland, and not just Jews, but generally people, then we had lots, and also even in stuff like espionage and counter-espionage, parts of V2 rocket or V1 and information about where to strike, for example, where V2 rockets were made on Peenemünde, on the island. That information was taken to the General Consul of Japan in General Governorship. So what part of the occupied Poland? He sent it to Japanese embassy in Sweden. Someone from Japanese embassy in Sweden talked to British embassy in Sweden, to a person in British embassy in Sweden, because of course Japanese and British also had very good sometimes relationships. And they took that to London, and then they knew how to bomb the place where where rockets that were aiming for London were being built, and stuff like this. Hundreds, thousands of examples like this. Okay, I will stop boring you now. Please like, share, and subscribe, and have a good day. Maybe I will do like second video tomorrow. Maybe I will do some other video soon. Take care. Bye.